All right, friends, welcome back. Today we have a fantastic interview with my dear friend, Joe Hurst. Joe, how you doing today, bud?
Fantastic. Looking forward to it, Cal.
Oh, man, I'm so excited. So Joe, at a professional level, is the co-founder of Veroot, a software compliance management system for logistics. That's a mouthful. Veroot is used by over 5,000 companies and is the fastest growing TSA, CTPAT, and vendor management software in the logistics market. Under Joe's leadership, Veroot has completely transformed the way freight forwarders and importers exchange their data, store documents, and request compliance information. Joe's most important job is a husband, father of 3 girls. He enjoys skiing, riding dirt bikes, and all kinds of sports. I'm surprised I didn't see poker on there. What's up with that?
That's going to come up during the conversation.
Okay, very good. And of course, golf. So yeah, we've got a lot of history that's developed over the last this year. But Joe, welcome to the show. So why don't you tell everyone how you and I connected? It's a pretty crazy story.
Yeah, so it goes back a few years. So maybe I'll just start with my childhood.
There we go. Let's go all the way back. Let's pick up all the scabs.
That's right. We'll go through all that trauma, right? First of all, it's been great reconnecting with you after all these years. How it started was a pretty interesting path. And I think I have a very unique childhood like you, where I think up until 5 years of age, everything, maybe is a little bit older than that, was pretty normal. I mean, late 70s, right? We had our big wheels.
Oh, yeah.
I had early 80s AT. We had the
Yes.
chips, right?
Yes.
You mentioned that. That was the best time, in my opinion, to grow up. It's hard to compare it, to what the kids go through now. I know they have the Stranger Things and they have the internet, but growing up in America in the late 70s, early 80s with Rocky and Star Wars was amazing. And I wish my kids could have experienced that. So I went to actually a Christian school for the first couple of years of my life. And, it's hard to say because I was young, but apparently I was a little rambunctious that had got into a little bit of trouble with the boys. We would wrestle and fight a lot. And then I got pretty moody because I didn't like some of my teachers. I thought they were tyrants, in the small Christian school. If you don't perfectly do everything, they get upset at you. So that was kind of my early childhood, great childhood. But what happened was around the year of 8 or 9, I think my mom was like, I don't know about this kid. So she pulled me out of school, believe it or not, and started homeschooling. And the interesting thing about that is I was actually going to school about a half a day. In the middle of the day, she would pull me out and go into the main area of the school and sort of teach me off to the side, and so all the kids would kind of come down the hall and they would see me at this little table working with my mom, which is super weird, maybe embarrassing to some degree. And then the next year, she pulled me out of school completely. And you're probably familiar with that time and the American school system history. Nobody ever heard of this.
Yes.
It was brand new.
It was radical. It was a fringe right-wing movement.
Exactly. That's how I would describe it. And so we literally had to go in our town. We had to go to the superintendent of our town and say, hey, we're doing this new super weird thing. Can we even do it? We had to go get all this permission. And by we, I mean my parents had nothing to do with this. But I was part of it, right? I had to go talk to the superintendent. They had to make sure that, nothing weird was going on. And so from there, luckily, I think at that point in time, this was gaining a little bit more steam, right? And a few other families, including yours.
The Tinter family.
Right? The Tinter family was in this little pocket of right-wing / Christian conservative homeschool movement. And so before long, I think I met you, however fleeting, at a gym class, I believe. Was your dad?
My dad was doing the Friday gym class. And I'm wondering if he was on sabbatical or something, because I'm trying to remember how in the world he had time to come. Yeah, he must have been on his first sabbatical.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I remember my parents instructing us when we were first homeschooled that if someone came to the door, we had to hunker down, stay below the windows, go down to the basement type of thing. Like it was such a radical thing that was like we didn't leave the house during the day because if people saw kids out at school, they would report us. I mean, we're talking early 80s, but just the thought that there was that type of government control back then is a little alarming in all honesty.
It was. I remember doing that. I mean, it was like, you think today, you're going to go out to Target and pick up some milk or whatever. We couldn't do that.
Yeah.
We had to do that after hours or in the confines of a very specific group of people.
Right. Or it was a school holiday, so the other
Right.
kids were off. So now I felt like I had my freedom. The crazy thing is I talk to these, especially public school kids that are in high school.
Yeah.
They go to school half day. Like, I don't know how they're getting their education. Well, I guess they're not for the most part, but the lack of time that they're spending in school. Now, granted, in homeschooling, it's so efficient. You can get a full day's worth of work done before lunchtime if you're buckled down and doing it. But yeah, it's very interesting.
It was bizarre. And I do remember that. I like, hey, okay, guys, the mailman's at the door, whatever, right? Don't show your face.
Yeah.
And luckily, though, those days were fairly short-lived where, I think probably by the late 80s, it wasn't so bad, right? And so I think more and more people started doing it. Of course, today I look at it, and it's nearly completely mainstream, even though it still is sort of considered fringe compared to what we went through. It's nearly mainstream.
Oh, yeah.
And in the meantime, they brought together all these groups and consortiums and all this where you can be part of it and actually be part of a community. So it's a good thing.
Did you have any of the conversations, or did your parents have any of the conversations that I remember overhearing as a kid? And you're kind of like looking back at them like, who are these idiot adults talking like this when I'm there overhearing a conversation? But they're like, your kid's going to be so weird. Like, how are they going to be socially adjusted and blah, blah, blah. And obviously, you come from a large family. Were all of your siblings homeschooled at one point?
I think so.
Okay. I've got 3 younger brothers, all of us homeschooled. I mean, we're all very successful in our own right.
Right.
Not a single government worker. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I used to be, but for the most part, entrepreneurial, self-employed business owners with, substantial net worths that would put us above the average American. And it's funny when people find out that we were homeschooled, they're like, you were homeschooled? Like, there's such a stigma on it. But I can tell you, your social skills are at the top, and we're going to touch on your sales book in a second. Like, you can't be awkward and be a good salesperson. My brother Mike, my brother Dave, especially, those two are just unbelievable at their craft. And it's really fun. And I know my parents relish the fact that all of us have broken all of the, 1980s stereotypes about homeschooling, and you have as well. So.
Well, yeah, and your brothers are incredible. I'm lucky to know them, and we'll talk about how I got right back into your life because of one of your brothers in a minute here. But one of the things that homeschooling forced me to do was sort of implicitly pursue excellence, because that whole outgoing or friendly attitude had to be developed from the ground up. I didn't have anybody to develop it with, except for my 2 younger sisters who were really kind of my peers at the time. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I had to learn how to be social. So for me, it was not just like, oh, you go to school every day, you're talking to these kids, it's normal. It's like, I had to think about like, oh, actually, I need to go up to somebody, introduce myself, talk to them. It was almost like this process or this recipe that I had to learn. And I think that's what's allowed me to, in a weird sort of way, be a little bit more successful in some of these areas. Because I'm like, it's not just you get out of bed and do it. There's a way to do things, and you have to think about things. And the more you think about things, the more you're personally responsible in those activities, the better you're going to be. I don't know if my parents were looking for that exact trajectory, but that's what I experienced.
Yeah. So we met, I think I was in the 5th or 6th grade. You were a year ahead of me, right? Graduated high school in 94?
92, actually.
Oh, 90. Wow, you're a couple of years ahead of me. Wow, you're just that much smarter than me. That's what it is. But you're only a year older than me, right? Okay. I'm 46. You're
48.
48. Okay, 2 years ahead of me. So my dad was leading this Friday gym class for a handful of homeschooled families. And that's how we met. But outside of that 1 year experience, our friendship didn't continue.
Yeah, we were one and done. Until, and this is sort of part of my journey as well that we'll talk about, is my wife was having all these health problems. When we got married, she kind of went downhill really quick. And we lived in the Cleveland, Ohio area where all my family is born and raised. And we took a trip out to the Phoenix area, sort of on a whim. And this was to attend a business conference that I was a part of. And she's like, boy, I actually feel a lot better.
Wow.
And for the first time in maybe like 7 or 8 years, she actually started jogging. We were walking in the time outside, and she's like, I think I'm going to go for a little jog. And I'm like, you?
Wow. What year is this?
This is probably, I would say probably about 8 years ago, so 2015-ish.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, let's try this little formula again. So we went out about, I don't know, 6 months later. And once again, after going downhill, when we went back to Cleveland and came back out here again, she felt a ton better. And so I was just like, and she didn't know it at the time because all our family and friends, everyone grew up there. I mean, if you're a Clevelander, you know what I'm talking about. You love your sports teams. All your friends and family are 20 minutes away. It's a great place to be part of the family.
Yeah.
But she was so much better out here. So I'm like, we got to move. We got to burn the ships. We got to just put all our chips on red, so to speak, and move out to Phoenix. So we did. And we found a spot out here. And I was telling a few family members, which happens to include your brother, because during the time we first talked about, now your brother married my sister. They have kids together, obviously, in Cleveland.
When David and Angela kind of connected, it's like it was completely separate from the fact that we'd ever did that class back in 1980.
And I have to admit to you, I didn't and barely even remember that class.
Yeah.
You probably do more than me because your dad taught it. I was probably forced to go. So I dumped that memory a long time ago, but there's little bits and pieces that come back. Yeah. So we saw each other, I think, at the wedding, just in passing, probably just shook hands, gave each other a high five. I was like, hey, good to see you. And then David mentioned when we decided we were moving to Phoenix, he's like, hey, I think my brother lives out there. And so he sent David the address we were considering purchasing. And then he got your address and he sent me a Google Maps with the two addresses circled. He's like, I think there's 1.5 miles between you two. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And one of the things I've told you this before that I'm most gracious for in life is that God gave me you when I moved out here as a friend, because it's sort of lonely when you're relocating, especially at that point in time. We didn't have health on our side. In particular, my wife didn't have health on her side. And so we kind of had to, besides work, besides my professional aspect, we kind of had to tone down our social lives. Mm-hmm. So to come out here and to be able to call you and you're like, hey, I've got this great poker night and I've got activities, golf and other things that you invited me to. Help me kind of come out of my shell that I had to retreat into to take care of my family for years. So that's kind of how we came full circle. And I think there's a lot of lessons in that for everybody to hear that, every once in a while, God will throw you a bone or life will throw you a bone. And you got to take a hold of that. So me, I'm not bashful. When you have poker night, I'm there. I think I've missed 2 nights so far. Like 6 or 7 years.
You win the
attend.
The only person to attend more than you is me. So
I think I've even been there on a night where you've been like, hey, I got to leave early or something.
Yeah, I believe it.
And the reason is because I'm so grateful for that. And also, I look at it as sort of a lifeblood for me out here. And I've sort of designed my life around it. To a bad, maybe all this to a fault, because my wife will sometimes be like, when is poker this month? We have 3 things to do. And I'm like, no, I got to figure that out.
Oh, there's a bunch of us who plan the month over poker. So that's awesome. And I remember my brothers were out here for my 40th birthday because I'm the oldest. So the first to turn 40. And they were out here for like a 36-hour stint. Obviously, my brother, your brother-in-law, has 5 kids. He's got a handful. And so they were out here for a quick visit. But they're like, hey, do you mind if Joe swings by? I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember Joe. And, we connected that you live close by. And then you came out, hang out with us as we were enjoying some cigars and just, hanging out for my birthday. And that's, I'm sure it's like, hey, we do this poker thing and just the connection. But, it's been awesome. Yeah, we've developed a heck of a friendship. Yeah. And I think a couple things is you have to be intentional. Like the lessons here is you have to be intentional about not only connecting with people, but also if you're in a spot, like be the inviter, make people welcome. Because Becca and I have, especially the military, have moved around, and it is so easy to be an outsider. And when people invite you in, it might not be the sphere that you end up spending a lot of time in long term, but to be that inviter is, I think, so important. And just being intentional about plugging in. We've moved around a lot, and I think the loneliness has hit Becca even more than me, because every time we moved, I at least had coworkers, where a lot of times she was staying at home. And it is tough. You have to put in the effort. There's a lot of energy that goes into building new spheres of influence. It's very draining for most people, but it's also well worth it.
Yeah, I mentioned this to you a few times as well for the folks that know you well, listen to your podcast regularly. You are the best networker I know. And I think you've mentioned that a lot of that is because of your past. You're in the military, you're moving around as a cop, different areas and things like that. And you just were almost forced to be that guy. But it doesn't come naturally. It's a lot of work. I know how much time and energy it takes when you plan a golf outing, plan poker. You had to buy three poker tables. You had to buy the chairs. You had to kind of set everything up, and people just come and enjoy it like I do. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah. But what I've also learned is that if you want it to happen, you got to make it happen yourself. If you invite the people, they will come. And I think a lot of people are just sitting there waiting for the invitation to the party. And the real answer is create your own party and invite who you want. And that's actually the cool thing is when you're the inviter, you get to control it. And so there's some strategies there. So yeah, that's kind of the long introduction to how we connected. It's pretty cool. You have something else to add?
Yeah, I wanted to say that. It's funny that you said that because I just read, of all people, a Bob Dylan quote. And he said, a lot of people look and keep looking and go find themselves. He's like, it's not about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself, right? And you said, you got to create your own party.
Yep.
And that's one of the key things you have to do in life is sort of create your own destiny.
Yeah.
And if you're sitting there passively waiting for that invite to come, I hate to tell you, as a homeschool kid or the mid-'80s, it ain't going to come.
Yep.
Okay. You've got to go out and grab that tiger by the tail.
Yeah. Well, and one of my favorite quotes from John Maxwell is most people accept the life that they were given and few choose to lead the life that they want. And the reality is, both of us could have accepted, the kind of the destiny that looked like we were headed towards still be in Ohio. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but certainly the abundance and just the lifestyle that we enjoy now, it required intentionality. We had to basically lead ourselves to get to where we're at right now.
We had to do different things. I mean, I had to get my wife healthy.
Yeah.
I wanted my kids to have a grandson. So even though it was a great personal expense, you have to make those decisions.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, folks, that's a long introduction. Bottom line is you're seeing two formerly homeschooled kids. We wanted to smoke cigars, kind of like Joe Rogan here. But Joe, being the better voice of reason, talked me out of it. I should have installed some ventilation. Had I known this was going to be a podcast studio, and had I seen Joe Rogan's podcast and had that idea, it just creates a whole new atmosphere, especially when you're interviewing a good buddy. But bottom line is, we feel very blessed. We beat the odds of being socially awkward, formerly homeschooled students. And, the funny thing is the stereotype that exists. I'm like, you realize you're assuming that every kid that goes to a private school or a public school is perfect. Like most of the mass school shootings I know of have happened by kids that went to public schools. So why are we not worried about every kid that goes to a public school is going to become a mass shooter, right? It's just like you can pick any demographic and you're going to have the far right end of the bell curve, the far left end of the bell curve, and then most people fall into the middle. But it certainly is very interesting how for us that homeschooling demographics stuck out. Well, hey, so Joe, long intro, but we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics. You took a look at my book, which I really appreciate, that's coming out, The 7 Disciplines of Uncommon Freedom. And one of my favorite concepts from that book or disciplines is the concept of running with lions. The concept I'll explain like this is that I can't overstate the importance of finding community with people who inspire, challenge, or mentor you. I have always believed you find greatness in pockets of community. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. You need people in your life who will push and support you in the hunt of uncommon freedom, really in the hunt of your greatness, whether it's physically, financially, in your parenting, in your marriage. That's why we run with lions. This discipline will make or break you because it works in both directions. So you can either run with lions, and that concept there is strong people going to help you be better, or you can run with jackasses. And, that's really comes from Dave Ramsey. He talks about the fact that, he's looking for thoroughbreds, and the opposite, or the thoroughbreds in donkeys look very similar, but they perform very differently. And I think it's Patrick Lencioni who actually calls him, a jackass. And then Jim Rohn says you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so that's what this concept is about. It basically means the same thing. So let's fast forward, Joe. I'm really glad to have this opportunity to interview you and really have more of a conversation. I've learned a ton about business from you. So tell me a little bit more about how I find you sitting across the table from me today. How did you get to where you're at?
Yeah. So we talked about the background, right? One of those things was, I think that was instilled in me as a young kid was performance and responsibility. And then also, again, I had to sort of get out of my situation or sort of optimize my situation. I had to decide to take on that responsibility. And for me, it started at a young age where I did have some extra time in the day. And so I started a little tiny small business in woodworking. And then I had more time, as you mentioned, you could get most of your school day done when you're homeschooled by about 12 or 1. And I used to work at a farm after that, right? So I had this work ethic instilled in me at a very young age, and it made me very entrepreneurial, right? But I didn't expect myself to be an entrepreneur at all.
Mm-hmm.
I loved engineering and computers, right? So I went in and started learning all about that, and actually got a co-op at some pretty amazing places, including the Department of Defense and things like that. So I was like, man, I'm on my way, right? Building computers and systems and, being this super nerd. I thought this is going to be me, right? I found my spot, right, in life. And, but there was just this nagging sort of background drumbeat that you got to kind of get from this spot to another spot. And so I tried my hand at a bunch of different things. At one point, I owned a women's fitness center, believe it or not. So I tried that.
Was that a Curves or what?
It was called Ladies Workout Express. It was like Hurst knockout.
Yeah.
Okay. And they were based out of Miami. We opened one up in Cleveland. We grew it from like 90 members to over 330 members, believe it or not. Yeah, in about a year. But I will tell anybody this that's going to start a fitness business, don't do it unless you really, really want to do it and probably break even.
Mm-hmm.
And that's if you're killing it. Now, there's companies who kind of beat that model up and find a way to squeeze a profit out of it, but it's a very difficult business. It did teach me how to sell, though, at another level, because when, a woman comes in that's not happy with herself, right, the first thing she's not necessarily looking to do is work out. It's hard work because, being in your business and as one of the premium health coaches in the country, people are not looking forward to working out right away or changing their diet. A big component of what we did, in fact, the first thing we did was get people to change their diet, right, which is very difficult.
Yeah.
Long story short, that taught me a lot about how to motivate people. And then from there, I tried my hand in a few other things, and actually I'm a salesman out in the field for a long time with AMD, Intel, a bunch of other companies like that. So I was in the semiconductor sales world. But it all came to a head when my brother was like, hey, listen, I got this idea for a software company. I know you've been honing your craft for a long time. Let's go do this. So together, we started Veroot. Now, I got to give him a lot of credit. He co-founded it. He took his 401k, cashed it out at the age of whatever he was, 26, put it into this business, built the software, and I built the clientele. Yeah. That sort of gives me, I guess, the credibility or the cachet to sit in front of you today and say, yeah, I know a little bit about what it takes to run with lions and how to be successful in business.
Yeah, and you're not going to do it on your own.
You definitely
So most people would call you, your day job title is entrepreneur. Can you tell us a little bit about your work life and what that means to you, being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so an entrepreneur is often a thankless job. And what it means is you get up in the morning and you do a lot of the same things, but you also do a lot of different things. And by that, I mean, you got to get your next client, you got to get your next receivable, and then you've got to figure out how to put out all the fires and then invent new ways to either market your product or whatever. So if you're an entrepreneur, or if an entrepreneur is a partner, such as a wife or husband or friend or whatever, you're going to be sort of like, wow, what is this person doing all day long? They're running around, constantly solving problems. And that's my day job, is solving problems. But I love it. I think I would get bored doing something else.
As you go through your day, what's your overarching philosophy on life and business and work?
Well, I think my overarching philosophy is there's a creator. Like, one of my hobbies, I like hiking. I like, as you mentioned before, riding my dirt bike. So when I go outside, and I think a lot of people that live in the city that don't get to experience it. You go outside and you see these animals and trees and everything kind of coming together, and you're like, I have one conclusion. There's a creator.
Yeah.
right? And so this informs your whole sort of life in the sense that, okay, there's a creator, therefore I'm responsible to serve something bigger than myself or praise something bigger than myself. So I need to be responsible in my daily life, right? To execute at a very high level. So I think that's kind of my worldview or daily way I sort of pattern myself is there's a creator, you have a responsibility to serve others, and your customers in particular are better than you or greater than you because you have to serve them. And sometimes it's going to hurt, but it's always worth it in the end.
Yeah, that's awesome. So obviously, you're kind of the sales face of the business, and you recently sent me a copy of a book that you wrote that you told me about, and I finally had a chance to review it, and it's phenomenal. You wrote that in just the last couple of years, right?
Well, I've had the idea. This is a tip if you're ever thinking about writing a book. I wrote down the chapters over the course of probably 10 years.
Okay.
Someday I'd want to write it down. And then, I think I just spent, a couple hours here and there on the weekends, just kind of writing things down over the past 2 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's a phenomenal book. It's called Selling to the Devil. Folks, you're not going to be able to find it in bookstores yet. But if I can, encourage Joe to make it available right now, it's just available more internally to his team. But it is such a good book. As a coach in what I do, I saw tons of application. In fact, I want to talk to you about having you come on and do a training for our broader team because I saw so much value in it. And the title, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, this is Joe pushing back on his Christian upbringing.
Right.
And then I read the book. I was like, oh, that explains it and it makes a ton of sense. But it's a solid book, and I'll just make a plug in advance. I told you it's kind of the sales version of The Compound Effect, which is one of my 2 books I read every single year. It's 6 chapters. It's a super easy read. It's a solid book, so way to go. And then kind of turning the tables, I know you had a chance to review my book, which I'm really grateful for. From the standpoint of running with lions, like how would you define the lion the way that I depicted in the book?
Yeah, and I'm going to maybe give you my spin on it since you asked me the question. I think lions come in a lot of different sizes. I mean, there's big lions, there's small lions, there's fast lions, there's slow lions, there's male lions, there's female lions. And the common thread, I'm going to go back to something I said before that I see, is every person that you want to be around with takes personal responsibility and also has goals in life. They don't have to be the most successful person, but they have to pursue excellence, right? That to me is the definition of a lion, because when you have friends and family around you, and then your other close friends and family that you depend on, you want them to tell you, hey, I think you can improve in this area, or here's an area you're excellent in. Like you just said about the book, my book, maybe you should think about, maybe print a few copies that get into other people's hands. Well, that's encouragement to me. Yeah. Now I have to go do it, right? So there's always this aspect of when you're running with lions that they're going to have certain expectations that will only help you be better. But as an example, I think a couple that I know, one of my good buddies, he got in a car accident and it took a lot from him. He was a brilliant engineer, had a brilliant mind. He was actually a National Merit Scholar.
Wow.
One of the most intelligent people. Basically helped me get through college, Kevin.
Okay.
That's right. All that was taken away from him, including his earning power.
Wow.
It was a brutal thing to watch. And his wife is an unbelievable prayer warrior. She could complain all day, but she doesn't. She calls me up from time to time and says, hey, I'm praying for your business. I'm praying that you're successful. And all the while, I know she is constantly picking up her cross every day and walking with it. Now, is she flush with $5 million in the bank? No. But that's the kind of lion you want on your side, right? So there's all kinds of different lions.
Yeah.
Different shapes and sizes.
A lion is not determined by net worth.
That is for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Why would you encourage people to really prioritize surrounding themselves with the lion type of person?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you try to do great things, the darkness comes upon you.
Yes.
This,
yes.
Right? You go through these valleys, these personal valleys. Sometimes they're public. If you do not have people that will throw you a line, people that you could talk to, sometimes even people you need to complain to when you're in that dark valley. It's going to be hard to make it.
Yeah, that's good. Pretty sure it's Darren Hardy talks about the wisdom of lions in that they know how to spend their energy and how to conserve it. Obviously, lions tend to prey on large game, and you haven't been on a safari yet, have you?
Not yet.
So we went,
On the list.
3+ years ago. It is an awesome experience. I would encourage anyone, if at all possible, go do a safari. We were in Kenya, and it is unbelievable to see lions in person. But one thing that Darren Hardy talks about is they don't chase mice. And for us as humans, there's so many insignificant things that we waste time on. And it's something that lions don't do. Obviously, they're one of the, what do they call it? The big five or the big seven, the animals that everyone wants to see. And the other really interesting thing is when you're on a safari, I mean, you've got this open top vehicle and you're looking out the side, and the lions could absolutely, they could jump on the car and climb into, if, the Land Rover or whatever it is that we're in, the Toyota, what is it? Toyota Land
Cruiser.
That's what it is. These things are like from the 60s or something. Unbelievable cars. There, you almost get this adrenaline rush knowing that if this lion wanted to, it could bite my hand off, it could jump into this cab, all kinds of things, but they don't. They know what they're focused on. And they just sit there and they're kind of nonchalant. They're not bothered by other things. And I think that is a good thing, not responding to everything, not reacting to everything. Is such a good lesson from lions for us.
It's critical. I mean, when you think about especially what you have to do in sales, right? If you're building a business,
yes,
a lot of people listening to this are trying to build their business. I always say, listen, if you make 200 calls a day, congratulations, you made 200 calls. But if you made 20 calls a day and got more business than the person who made 200 calls, who's a better sales guy? Who's the better networker? Naturally, the guy that knew who to call, not how many calls they made, right? That's the critical thing. So lions focus on the absolute necessary items they need to get to the next level. And like in my life personally, a lot of people watch all these shows like, Game of Thrones. I'm trying to think of these other ones. I don't watch a lot of TV, and the TV I watch are things I like to do. Like I watch drumming videos, watch dirt bike videos, and not that, I love TV. I love TV. I wasn't able to watch TV when I was a kid, so but I intentionally try not to have it be a big part of my life because I know it's going to take away from the big game hunting that I'm trying to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is your method to build relationships so you can surround yourself with others who want to be great?
Yeah. Well, I think context of our conversation, some of it is relying on people like you that are excellent networkers that are even better than me. So if I see someone like you that is an excellent networker, I'm going to ask to get in your circle, and I'm going to try to make your circle even better, right? When guys come to our poker game as an example, I'm always out there saying, hey guys, what's up? Shaking hands, patting backs, that sort of thing. I'm trying to make them feel more welcome. And then I will try to bring in some of my friends into the group who I think are going to make that group better.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my methodology. I'm not the perfect networker. I'm not the ideal guy. I'm a glue guy, and I try to make it better. So that's just how God made me. Yeah. So I take it and run with it.
Yeah. One of the cool things that I love about, specifically the poker group is how interconnected all of us, or many of us, have become.
Yeah.
You've got guys from all different walks of life. I think about you go riding with Bill Davis, who you met through me. And then, you brought JP, who brought Dave Earhart. Both of those guys have become really good friends. I'm really close to Dave. I'm having a meeting with him in an hour from now to talk about how he can help us grow our social media following and get more followers on YouTube and Facebook. And there's a book, I don't remember who the author, but he says, you already know everyone you need to know. Like literally, if you just leverage all the relationships that you have, that we're all familiar with the 6 degrees of separation. Right. The bottom line is, you're connected already through your sphere of influence to everyone you need to know to be successful. The question is, are you providing value to that sphere of influence? And are you the type of person who people want to bring back? I think that's a huge, just because someone gets invited to the poker game doesn't mean they're coming back, right? Like, it's an open invite. Like, people know, hey, you're welcome to invite anybody, but it doesn't mean you're going to make the list, because if you come and, you're a jerk and you're completely negative or, falling over drunk, you're not welcome back. I mean, there's plenty of drinks get consumed at poker night, not by me, because I'm a better poker player. So
Right.
I'll take advantage of all the drinkers if I can. But, if you don't fit, you're not going to get invited back.
You're not adding value. I mean, the
Right,
key
right.
part of any social interaction or network interaction is the ability to add value. And life is not about yourself, Kevin.
Mhm.
It's about everybody else.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it, is you feel sometimes like, this should be my party. But you're not going to be successful living that way.
Yeah. So obviously you've worked with a lot of different personalities through the years, especially in your leadership role as far as sales. What would you say to the person who doesn't like the stress of being a super high achiever or having their own company? Can you be a lion in any industry?
Yes, you can. In fact, it's funny. I think my daughter coined the phrase, and one of my good friends now repeats it. He's like, not everybody can be a world beater, Joe. And by that, some people like to just take it easy times, or may not have to always think about, you want to execute on this next thing. You were a policeman, right? Probably wasn't your final calling, right? Because you're sitting here.
Right, definitely
here
wasn't.
to do this. It wasn't. But do you know guys who it is their final calling?
Yeah.
Yeah. And some of them are excellent at it. There's a Cleveland cop that comes to mind, and now he's had some issues with media issues or potential issues with being a little bit too hard on people. And there's this one story where, he went into a basement and a guy pulled a gun on him, and he probably shouldn't have shot the guy. Mm-hmm. But long story short, this guy literally saved people from the Cuyahoga River. Mm-hmm. He's an amazing guy, and he spent, I think, 40 years as a cop, and is the most decorated cop in Cleveland. His name is Jim Simone, if you're wondering the name. But I'm not going to go on record to say I support this guy, because he has some issues that different people have brought up. But he loved being a cop. He lived for it. In his mind, anyway, the best cop he could be. And he wouldn't want to do anything else, given the opportunity. So this guy decided to become a lion, or an expert in his profession, and ended up sort of putting all his chips on the table and said, this is what I want to do. Let's go back to your dad, who was a teacher. I mean, he made a lot of impact on a lot of lives. In fact, I've heard him say, every once in a while, someone will come up to him and be like, Mr. Tinner, you made this big impact on.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things your dad was able to do was also sort of put away his, money in his 401k and do some things. And they've got, a nice little piece of property and everything now. But he didn't complain, right? He didn't get upset at his station in life. He just wanted to do it, right? And I think you can be a lion if you pursue excellence in that particular area. What I will say is, if you are a cop or a school teacher, you're going to need to make some intelligent decisions. For instance, you're going to need to understand, listen, you're not going to live in the biggest house. Mm-hmm. You're not going to drive the fastest cars.
Yep.
And if you do, you better have a side hustle.
Yeah.
You better have a plan. That goes back to the personal responsibility issue. You're not going to achieve a certain level of financial success, and you have to be okay with it.
Yep.
So my recommendation is, if you're going to go be a teacher, don't get a teaching degree from Harvard where you're $500,000 in debt before you get your $50,000 teaching job.
Yep.
Go to the community college, go to the state school, graduate with the least possible debt, and say, you know what? I feel led in life to make an impact on these students. That's what I'm supposed to be here for. That's a line. Now, if you go and get into debt and you're just living hand to mouth day to day, and you're just upset and you're complaining, how are you going to be effective in anybody's world, let alone your students' world?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. The reality is, kind of being a lion has more to do with excellence than income.
It's everything.
Like that. Yeah. And, I remember the transition from being a Marine Corps officer to a police officer. in the Marine Corps, every leader is responsible for everything that their Marines do or fail to do. And to the point where, as a second lieutenant or first lieutenant, my shop or my, platoon, if a Lance Corporal got arrested for being drunk, he's underage on a Friday night, the CO holds me responsible. And I give my Friday night safety brief. And it's like, I understand the concept, but why the heck are you holding me responsible for something that some knucklehead Lance Corporal did on his own when I was miles away? And that gets really old. So that kind of calls me, I just want to be on my own, on a line, responsible for myself, no one else. And that's what I had as a police officer. And initially, when I really enjoyed it, what I loved was the autonomy. It's like, I just had to take care of my calls. I could self-initiate stuff and really focus on what I like. But then I also realized the downside to that. And I would say I was a lion of a cop for at least a period of time. The downside was I had no time freedom.
Right.
And financially, I was tapped out. Like, I was making as much as I could. The only way for me to make more was to work more, which meant I was spending less time with my family, which is why I finally decided, push came to shove and, the right set of opportunities came my way. But you're spot on with that.
You were at a crossroads, so you knew you wanted some specific things for your family. You wanted to send your kid to certain schools. You wanted to have them certain opportunities. You can't lie to yourself and say, I want this for them, but yet I'm here. You had to find a way to get to that next level.
Yeah.
And if that's what you're searching after, then put a plan together to do that. Don't just, the old saying about insanity, doing the same thing over and over,
yes,
and over, expecting different results is definitely a key.
Yeah. And the other thing, and I think this is a great lesson for everyone, is to understand that just because you were once a lion doesn't mean you'll always be a lion. For me, I loved my job for the first 5 years. The last 2 years, I hit burnout and I was no longer motivated. I did what I had to do, but I knew I was no longer the cop that I once was, and my motivation was gone. And so my encouragement for everyone is when that happens, take the wake up call, go start looking for some other opportunities. So, whether it's going from being a cop to a complete career change or something like that, go find something where you're going to be a lion again instead of just being complacent.
I totally agree. And a lot of that has to do with leadership. Mm-hmm. Once the leadership above you doesn't treat you right, or you're in a situation that doesn't give you any joy, it takes the desire to be a lion out of you real quick, right?
Yep.
And especially in your situation.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and this goes back to the entrepreneurial process, is that being an entrepreneur is hard because you aren't just responsible for yourself. It is a nice gig to be responsible for yourself. Do what you need to do for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. Go watch the Browns on the weekend, have fun, and not have to worry about this. That is not my life. Mm-hmm. People look at sometimes some of the things I have, or maybe say, okay, this guy's got this particular thing in life, but they don't understand that my mind's always thinking like, what's the next thing? And that's okay. I'm fine with that, but not everybody's okay with that. You have to make that decision, like, I'm going to take that next step up, or you have to basically say, I'm going to do what I do and do the best of my ability.
Yeah, good stuff. So Joe, what are some of the things you've learned over the years that help people become successful in business? Or even if it's not their own business, Dave Ramsey talks about the fact that we're all self-employed, right? Basically, even if I'm self-employed, because my production, my performance determines whether or not I keep my job. So I think having that self-employed mindset, even if you are an employee, is a good thing. But what are some specifics that you have learned to help people be successful in business?
Yeah. Actually, I can't agree with you more on your assessment. In fact, I always say to the folks that I'm in charge of or that report to me that you own your own business just inside of the business that I manage.
Yep.
Right? You have the ability to control your own destiny. So it's not at every company, right, where the quote unquote boss says that. A lot of companies trying to sort of tamp their people down. But I'm like, hey, if you're willing to grow with us, we're willing to grow with you. So by the way, I think if you own a business, you need to think that way. Mm-hmm. That's an important thing to do, is to make sure everyone feels like they're owning a little chunk of their own business, right? And that's the way you have to approach it in everything. That's just life. If you want to be successful, you have to be responsible for the little piece of land that you own.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So folks, just as we wrap up, want to remind you just the importance of running with lions. We talk about this all the time on this podcast, and it's something that I have seen impact my life positively in so many ways. And that's just the importance of surrounding yourself with people. Like John Maxwell says, if you're the smartest person in a room, get yourself into a better room. If you're the wealthiest person in the room, get yourself into a different room. If you are the healthiest person in a room, get yourself into a better room, because it's really easy to get a little bit cocky and complacent when you're the healthiest, wealthiest, smartest in a particular room. But then you intentionally put yourself in a different room and you realize, okay, there's lots of room for me to grow. Joe, I know that your company Veroot is a little bit of a niche, but can you give us, for people who would want to work with you, and how can they get more info?
Yeah, you could go to our website, Veroot.com, Veroot.com. If you're just morbidly curious about what we do, I would say that we're definitely a niche business type of company. We deal with logistics companies primarily, and also importers of goods. So if you're in the logistics compliance area, look us up and check us out. But in addition to that, I do want to say we are very thankful for each one of our customers, and it's a massive privilege to serve them. And you can probably see it as sort of an overarching discussion about running with lions. We're fortunate to have some customers that are lions. Mm-hmm. So when you deal with some of these customers that are just amazing or so aggressive, they kind of pace you as a business person. You're like, gosh, this guy's so amazing. He's so awesome. It kind of gives you that same goal or same drive. So I will say, one of the best things you could do as a business owner, and that Veroot tries to do, is not only have the lions surrounding us, which are fellow employees, associates, and for me, my friends like you, but we try to get amazing customers. And that's what you ultimately need as a business person to push you to those heights.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that not every customer is a customer that you want to have.
That is for sure.
Right. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everyone for joining us today. Joe, thank you so much for carving some time out of your schedule to hang out. It was awesome. I look forward to doing it again. And I'm looking forward to interviewing more amazing guests on the show and diving into the concepts that you will find in my new book that comes out in November, The 7 Disciplines of Uncommon Freedom. We'll see you later, friends.
Thank you.